My name is Daniel Mancilla, and I am a chief editor here at Funimation. My job is to oversee everything that requires going to broadcast. So anything that is going to Cartoon Network, going to Nicktoons, I am responsible for overseeing it and making sure that it goes out properly. I started off just watching people do their work. I'd sit behind two people and watch them painting out blood off of Goku, or they'd be painting the W out, but putting a bush. And that was my first involvement. And then after, they gave me the chance to actually dub some tapes. So I would string together like 4 VHSs and record one episode at a time, over and over and over. Sometimes I'd spend the whole day making one episode, but it'd take, 30 minutes an episode times 10 hours. So I'd make 4 VCRs. You do the math. It was real boring, but I was still watching Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z to me was very foreign looking, obviously. I was used to watching Smurfs. I was used to watching He-Man. I liked He-Man, so whenever I saw Dragon Ball Z and the spiky hair, it threw me off a little bit. I did not know what to make of it, but once I started to watch it, it was pretty cool.
It's a classic. It's one of the greats, and if you're an anime fan and you don't watch Dragon Ball Z or you haven't seen it, then I don't think you're a true anime fan.
It's a classic. It's been around for a while.
I had already, looked through like 20 or 30 Dragon Ball comic books, but first time I saw it was, I think, on Cartoon Network.
If somebody asked me, what do you recommend? I would always recommend, a staple as Dragon Ball Z.
We painted everything out because censorship did not allow, they were censored, and we were not allowed to show any blood on TV. And we'd send it off to get checked to make sure that it was good for TV, for broadcast. And she would come back with notes. She'd send the notes to Barry, our producer, and she'd say, okay, this is what needs to be edited, or this is what needs to be cut. And after a few of those notes written to us, we figured, okay, we got this down, and that's kind of how I got involved in editing for broadcast. I was able to take all the knowledge that she handed to us, and we moved on from there.
The strongest I've ever felt.
Please, I have to hurry. It's Vegeta. He's right outside.
Are his intentions pure?
We would receive VHS tapes. We would then ingest them onto the computer, a really old Avid. I can't even tell you which version it was. It was super old. And we'd take a VHS tape, run it through a box into the computer, and we'd have our episode. So then Barry would edit the show, spit out an EDO, give me the EDO, and I'd punch it into our online system and edit it deck to deck. And it was kind of fun, actually, because I'd be taking, footage from 3 or 4 different episodes, putting it together, and sometimes I'd just hit auto record, and that's like the best function ever. You'd hit auto record and you just watch the tapes go. Whereas nowadays, you just ingest it in the computer and find the clips. Very similar, except for actually it was physical tapes that you had to deal with. Nowadays, we deal with QuickTimes. We spit out QuickTimes to the audio guys. We spit out QuickTimes to subtitling. And once they get done with their work, they just let us know, and we'll bring it all back and either make a final QuickTime or lay it to tape if need be. If it needs to go to broadcast, then most likely we'll lay back to tape.
What? The signal's breaking up. Hello? Master Roshi! Oh, darn it! This stupid satellite phone! I hate using outdated technology.
Yeah, we went from VHS all the way to touching screens now. So, I can download it on my PlayStation Vita, on my iPad, You know, it's way different than what it was just 10 years ago.
I'm actually very impressed. Back when I was in my late teens and early 20s, it wasn't as accessible as it is now. It was harder to be able to watch it. You have to wait till Saturday. You know, a lot of the video stores, Blockbusters, didn't have them at the time. I love that the fact that you can go on Netflix, you can go, I have two Rokus, so we love Funimation channel on our Roku devices.
My first editing rig was 2 decks and a VTR controller. It was a nice little setup. And it was kind of intimidating because I was an 18-year-old walking into this office room that had a giant conference table with a couple of computers on it and 2 $45,000 decks next to it. I was not going to touch a $45,000 deck. That was twice the amount of my car, maybe 3 times the amount of my car. And I was a little intimidated, and it had a bunch of buttons, green, red lights all over it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to touch that. We had tapes that we ingested back and forth. We edited back and forth. And as the years went on, we added more and more decks. And we upgraded our computer systems, but mainly my rig remained the same. It was very simplistic. I had a computer monitor, an editing console, keyboard, and the decks.
It was the first anime I watched. Wasn't really a big fan of anime until then, and started watching a ton of anime after that.
My friends was like, yo, check out Dragon Ball Z, and I started watching that. And ever since then, I've been buying anime like crazy.
It brings me back to being a teenager.
You know, as Funimation expanded, we had more people doing other tasks, and we had some people watching our shows, QCing, albeit very lightly, but our producers who were in the cattle business owned a feed mill store, and they brought their feed mill monitor that was used to monitor entrances, in other words, their cameras. They brought those monitors, their rat-infested feed mill monitors, to QC video. They didn't work very well, but they showed picture. So it was good enough, and we used them for a while until one of our producers finally had enough. He's like, hey, why don't you get us something good?
All right then, I'm not taking this anymore.
We were editing without knowing if anybody was going to pick it up. As far as Cartoon Network or Nicktoons, this was way down the road. We were just editing to get it on TV. We were trying to Americanize our Japanese show. And we did the best we could with as little time as possible. And thank goodness it worked out for us. I wasn't directly involved with that. The writers were friends of the producers. And so they were the brain trust. They got together. They came up with a plan of how we're going to go about this. Now, we're going to Americanize the show. We're going to move forward with it, and we'll see how things go.
There's always new villains coming on, new stuff happening. Like, something always has to happen, and it kind of keeps you hooked on.
I think I connected to it because, number one, it was one of the first cartoons that I saw that was completely different than the stuff I was seeing here.
The characters, they're just like, they're so deep, and they're like, the character development is just so awesome.
I was actually living in Mexico, and I believe it aired over there before it aired in the States. And I want to say I was in my late teens, maybe early 20s, but from the get-go, I thought it was the coolest thing.
We had Japanese VHS tapes, which we ingested. And we had translators that worked in Japan and sent us a script along. Paper script, mind you. We didn't have electronic scripts at the time, so we were sent a paper script typed up as what was translated. And we also received a ton of Spanish DBZ tapes. I don't know where the Spanish tapes came from. I believe it aired somewhere in Mexico. I don't know. I'm not for sure. But me being Hispanic, I was able to watch Dragon Ball Z in Spanish, so I understood basically what was going on for the whole series. And I was able to help our producers and our team with being able to assist and find out what was going on in the show as we went forward. But as far as the dubbing process, you know, we hired our writers, we hired obviously the actors to come in and do their job.
Don't you get it, Vegeta? Ginyu is letting you win to switch with your body.
Daniel Kokenauer and Barry Watson were producers at Funimation for a long time, and they were my bosses, really. Barry was my direct boss. Daniel was my indirect boss. He was the owner of the company. He had final say on everything, and it didn't matter what. He had final say. Working with Barry was a fun experience. He taught me a lot of how to edit, how to go about editing. Working with Daniel, I did not work with Daniel very much. He would just come in and say, we need this, we need that, and we had to get moving. With Barry, he came in and said, we need this, we need that, and we just kind of sat around for a little bit until he gave us his Barry look, and then we would, all right, let's go. Daniel and Barry had a contact that they knew at Ocean, and at the time, since we didn't have any hardware, any production or a production facility here in Texas, then the easiest thing to do was to go with this guy up north of the border. And Barry would go up there at Ocean Studios and record 2 to 3 episodes at a time. And they already had a pool of actors and actresses who were able to go in and record, which made it a lot easier because they didn't have to find actors to go in. It was simply a matter of picking what voice sounded well for each character. And once they did that, they got the ball rolling, and the rest is history.
In mere moments, I will possess all the Dragon Balls, and then, immortal, I will defeat Frieza to become ruler of this dimension.
In mere moments, I will possess all of the Dragon Balls, and then the universe will be mine. No one, not even Frieza, will be able to stop me.
After 50-some-odd episodes of recording at Ocean, we came back to Texas, and we had an audition for all the DBZ voices. There were some very wild auditions. My involvement was to sit there and record. I'd sit there and hit play and record on a DAT machine. And at the end of the day, we'd review, you know, which characters or which actors we liked the most, and we'd go from there. The producer would every now and then look over to me and say, kind of nod, this one's a keeper, or no, we're not getting this guy.
Guru's house should be just ahead. Right. I don't know. If Guru can release Gohan's powers, there's a chance.
Since we already had the 2 decks, we were able to use those 2 for our master video, but we bought a whisper room, and the whisper room was the coolest thing ever. Now, it was a sound recording closet, really, and the actor would pop in, have a mic, it was soundproof, and we'd give him his cues, he'd watch the screen, and he'd go from there.
My favorite character is Vegeta, mostly because of his attitude. Like, I really like that whole cocky, I'm better than everyone else, and I think it's funny.
Even though I love Goku, I love Vegeta because he's always working. His work ethic it's just so. He'll go and work out in that with the time chamber for like years just to get close to that man.
Did you really think you could sneak up on me, little man? Did you really think that you could fool me with such a simple ruse? Like I'd believe for a second that Kakarot's son came back to face me all alone.
I am a huge Dragon Ball Z fan, and I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan, and if you watch Dragon Ball, Yajirobe was a very popular character, and I loved it when he came in and chops off the tail on Vegeta as an ape. That is one of my favorite all-time scenes. He he's such a coward, but he goes in there and does the one important thing and chops off that tail, and Goku's able to defeat Vegeta thanks to that.
Show him what it means to be merciful.
At my last convention, I noticed a little boy who got all excited because we had a scouter. So next thing you know, the grandpa comes and he acts just as excited as the little boy does. I mean, I don't know who is fangirling more.
A lot of people I know who used to watch it, including myself, they still like show like their younger brothers or sisters, their cousins, kids like who are like 5 to 6 or 5 to 10, like they're still watching it now. And I think the fact that they're remastering it, it's also good for them because it's like passing on to the next generation.
My nieces and nephews watch it. That was one of the first cartoons I introduced them to.
Consider I've been working at Funimation and for Dragon Ball Z longer than I've had my kids. I introduced DBZ to them at a very early age, and my kids will always ask me the hypothetical questions. Dad, who wins, Goku or Superman? Who wins, Vegeta or Spider-Man? And the answer is always Goku. Goku will win every time. Why? Because he's got senzu beans and rejuvenation chambers. So Goku will always win.
After all this training, I'd say I've earned a little snack. What? Is that all there is?
Dragon Ball Z will never age. It's got such vibrant colors that keep you actively watching the show. And Goku, Gohan, Chi-Chi, Bulma, all those are awesome characters. Master Roshi, gotta love him. Yajirobe, underrated character. It's a show that will always be in the hearts of boys. And sometimes when I watch Dragon Ball Z, I feel like I do not want to grow up. I just want to continue to watch. And if it's ever on TV nowadays, I'll still sit there and watch it for at least a few minutes.
There's a lot of life lessons in there. It covers, every type of lesson you could learn, like, love, loyalty, the difference between right and wrong, sacrifice, being courageous.
I think it's a lot of, like, at least people in my generation, like, it's a lot of people's first, like, TV shows. And it's, like, one of the first TV shows you get hooked on. And then to watch it change and get better or actually grow, like, kind of keeps you committed to it.
It's very important to just the whole anime culture. It's the classic. I mean, it's one of the animes that brought attention to all other animes. And you got to start at the beginning to understand where anime is now.
It really is a top-notch job. We have spent hours remastering this, hours and hours and hours, late nights, a lot of coffee, a lot of caffeine. I hope you enjoy our show. We've really spent a lot of time working on it, and I'm a really big fan, and I hope you are too.